Aloha everyone, it's Ajanette and I am here to do your chapter, well, it's technically module 5B, part 2, looking at analytical psychology by Carl Jung. We do pronounce his name Carl Jung, and just like with Freud, we should really kind of understand some of his history and his own personal experiences that actually contribute to his theory. Like Freud, brilliant man, they actually had tremendous respect for one another as professionals, and they really admired one another's theories and work. He also has a medical background. Jung also did go to med school as well, and he completed the psychiatric training as well. And instead of bringing the neurology approach that Freud brought, he actually brings a little bit of a spiritual approach, and we'll talk a little bit about his father's background and history, but he definitely brings a spiritual element and physics even, and so there is kind of this metaphysical, very spiritual, kind of mystical tone to his theory, which is very appealing to many people. He did contribute to the field of personality by presenting our first concept of personality types. And he actually, his theory is kind of a foundation for a very popular theory that's used today, and we'll talk about that kind of near the end of this section. But he too believed that our personality derives from our unconscious, only he very much extended this notion of the unconscious, drawing upon, both his training in westernized society, but also in his studies of Eastern societies, India, China. And so it's interesting how he integrated his learnings from both ends of the global world. So when we're looking at his family and personal background, his dad was a pastor, and not only did he, serve in the church, but he also served in an insane asylum. So he has kind of this mystical connection through that end, but also his mom was institutionalized for a time. And so there's also that realm, right? Now, his dad was a scholar, and he studied Oriental, and I use that very loosely, in Arabic languages. And the reason I say Oriental is because that really is considered a derogatory term by today's accounts. It is a term that was commonly used certainly in Jung's time, but in modern time, and particularly in social sciences and ethnic studies, we would not reference Oriental languages. And interestingly enough, when you talk about Asian Americans, they are the most diverse racial and ethnic group, and they include more countries, national and ethnic identities, and more languages than any other ethnic or racial group. And so we do want to be mindful that there's tremendous diversity within the Asian community. So that being said, certainly his background and experiences led to a religious curiosity of sorts, and that kind of made its way into his theory to some extent. I think anything that inspires analysis and curiosity can be a beautiful thing. And just like with Freud, I can admire the genius that contributed to the development of the theory, even if I have criticisms of the theory itself. And the same is true with Jung. But what he did do is he did really have a deep appreciation for this notion of our psyche, and he was very driven by curiosity and inspired to learn more, and that's a beautiful thing. Sometimes when we take a purely scientific approach, we can be locked in, and we can't always wholly embrace other ideologies that might be out there, right? And so he did strive to consider alternative explanations and components that may not be accounted for in our scientific method. He presented this concept of a psyche, like an energy, right? And it's very dynamic and complex. And he suggested that, like Freud's theory, where it demanded a lot of balance in our psychosexual development to avoid us becoming fixated or developing pathologies, Jung too really talked about like these balanced energies in the world that influence our psychological functioning. That they work together and complement one another in ways that allows us to have a psychological stability and balance. He also talked about this dynamic motivation from within us, right? Where we strive to kind of resolve imbalances, and we're seeking and pursuing that balance. And so your personality is naturally evolving in pursuit of balance, of stability. And it might, try to make sense of opposing forces and try to figure out how their wholly integrated self might benefit from those oppositional forces. And that's actually a concept that Jung presented, was this fully integrated self. And a fully integrated self is one that has awareness, consideration, and acceptance of all the different parts of who we are, including what he called the shadow side, which is more of our hidden side, more of our repressed side, where things might be stowed away in order to protect our psychological stability. Now, like Freud, Jung very much believed our personality is driven through the unconscious. And he actually broke up where Freud just talked about unconscious, as a driving force. He broke it up into two separate constructs, one being your personal unconscious, which is based on your own personal experiences, your own lived experiences, and how that might inform and shape your own unconscious, right? The collective unconscious is something we inherit. It's something that's passed on through generations. It contains these inborn patterns, concepts, including things such as gender roles, right? And he suggested they were stored in these archetypes, right? And these archetypes were inherited, and they were these psychic kind of mystical concepts that we couldn't study scientifically. They were more abstract in nature, but they were effectively resources. They were the lessons and patterns that previous generations had seen, observed, and they developed behavior in response to those things, and then they were passed down from generation to generation by way of these archetypes that are held within the collective unconscious. And collectively, that represents kind of innate patterns of behavior and processing. And for specifically when we talk about like gender roles and masculine and feminine and balancing those two energies, those archetypes are the anima and the animus. And again, they're opposing forces, and you're trying to find balance. And that's kind of a common theme in Jung's theory. And there are a number of archetypes. You aren't expected to, dive into that further unless you so choose, right? If you want to engage in your own self-analysis and explore some additional research on Jung's theory and different archetypes that he proposed, you're more than welcome to. But here's some of them for your own reference. And, again, they're just kind of these, I don't really want to call them templates, but they're almost like, file folders of information, knowledge, perceptions, and then the consequential feelings, behaviors, and responses we have to that knowledge base that are stored within our collective unconscious. And so when you look at that collective unconscious, keep in mind that some of the patterns that emerged based on experiences from generations past may no longer be healthy and adaptive today, right? So the gender roles that were adopted and passed on from 3 or 4 generations ago, they may not be, not only are they not relevant today in a modern society, but they may also be in some ways damaging or debilitating, because they might keep us from really achieving our full potential if we continue to perpetuate those gender roles and pass up opportunities to have a more egalitarian and balanced, equitable, inclusive society. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the shadow. This was an element of our personality. I would liken it most similar to the id in Freud's theory. It very much is where kind of those unbridled passions and feelings and desires reside. It's where our aggression and our impulses and our urges kind of reside. And, you know, we shield this. Like, we don't show everybody our aggression, our anger. We don't show everybody, you know, our urges and our desires. We don't talk about our sexual desires to just anybody, right? So we kind of mask them. We kind of hide them away in the shadows, but it very much is still part of who we are. And Freud suggested that we can't put it away in a box because that's unhealthy, but instead we have to acknowledge it, be aware of it, and assimilate it into the rest of our conscious being, and that's how we become a fully integrated self. You can't just stow it away. You know, you've heard that, like when you get angry and you just push it down, or you're unhappy in a relationship, you just push it down, and someday you might explode, right? Well, think of the shadow in much the same way, in that you really need to kind of make friends with it, so to speak. Acknowledge its presence, understand the factors that contribute to it, acknowledge its power and strength, but not letting it take power over you, which can happen if in fact you're not willing to find healthy ways to integrate those aspects of your personality. Also be mindful that as I'm referencing it as somewhat kind of negatively, it also has wonderful creative power and energy as well. And so it's not purely something that's negative or bad or evil per se, but it's kind of untamed, almost like an unbroken horse, right? Something like that. We'll look at it in somewhat of a more positive way. Okay, as I mentioned, one of Jung's most powerful contributions was this idea of personality types. Now, going back to that whole notion of balance, right? And that those opposing forces that are in contrast with one another, and finding a balance between the two. Personality types function much the same way, according to Jung's theory, and he suggested there's 2 different types of primary attitudes that you see: introverts and extroverts. Extroverts, and think more about energy, right? This is more about, you know, a spiritual, a psychic kind of energy, right? Introverts draw their energy from solitude. They are more empowered when they're alone. They're more productive when they're alone. They feel strengthened and more confident when they're alone. Whereas when they're in groups, it's like their energy is being sucked out of them, right? It's a drain. It strains them. And extroverts are the opposite. Extroverts draw energy from being around others. They benefit from that collective energy and that collective dialogue and presence and conversation. And when they're alone, they actually are not quite as productive or focused or energized or motivated. And so they're opposing, right? Your introvert and extrovert personalities have opposing energy and sources of energy. And then he also suggested that you have this thinking and feeling function of personality, where I can either make decisions based on logic, I can think things through rationally, I can weigh the pros and cons and draw up a balance sheet and determine where the decision lies is based on which one has the greater probability of positive outcomes, versus feelings, right, where I'm looking at more of my intuition and my emotions and yes, here's these pros and cons, but like when you're choosing to go to a college, right, and every college you're accepted into at the university level has pros and cons to it. Maybe you want to go, you want to stay in a state with your family, or you want to move out of state, right? And there's pros and cons to both. And ultimately, you let your intuition guide you. You make a decision where you're like, yes, but I feel safer here, or I feel like there's more opportunity and growth for me here. And you allow those feelings to have a greater influence over you than just the pure logic of it all. And then the other concept is sensing versus intuition. And when we're talking about sensing, we're really talking about paying attention to your external environment in all of your sensory experiences, like what's happening in the world around you, versus intuition, really paying attention to your hunches, your instinct, your internal dialogue and energy. And you actually have Briggs and Myers, who came along and built on these notions and concepts and constructed the Myers-Briggs personality test, which the Myers-Briggs personality types are probably some of the most popular ways for like everyday lay people to describe their personalities. And they're basically drawing on those concepts. Are they introvert? Are they extrovert? Are they sensing? Are they intuition? Are they thinking? Are they feeling? Right? They're kind of expanding those concepts, they break it down. I'm actually going to have you in your learning activity go do a free Myers-Briggs test and assess your personality. Learn more about the dimensions of the Myers-Briggs that actually built off of the concepts from Jung that we just talked about, and see how that relates and compares to the other personality assessments you've already done, and see, if what elements of the psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, and analytic theories align with your personality and your views on how your personality may have developed. This idea of synchronicity is really important because from this particular theoretical perspective, the idea that things happen coincidentally or just randomly is kind of thrown out, right? Jung believed that there weren't really coincidences, that, effectively your unconscious was telling you something, whether it was your personal unconscious or your collective unconscious, but there was some other reason outside of logical explanation or even known information that accounts for, why something was said. Maybe I said someone's name that, I was talking about person A and I referenced the name of person B. Well, why am I thinking about person B? Like, do I have a particular affinity to person B? And then, Jung took it further and looked at like time relativity and and, fate, destiny, these outside forces very much could be speaking to us and through us, right? And so, although it is unscientific on its face, I want you to really think about Einstein's theory of relativity. I want you to think about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. These are both concepts that really kind of defy our traditional scientific reasoning. And so be open to possibilities, be open to questioning, be open to exploring, because that's what Jung's theory did. So when you're getting through the self-analysis element, if you choose to analyze yourself in alignment with Jung's theory, do allow yourself a little creativity to vary from more of the scientific approaches that we went over in a previous module. Okay, so that being said, I am going to leave you to wrapping up. Remind you to do your reading as posted at the beginning of these slides and on your corresponding course page. And then additionally, make sure you're submitting your reading and lecture notes. And then you're engaging in that learning activity where you can actually do the Myers-Briggs assessment, and then take some opportunity to do a self-analysis, analyzing your own personality through the different lenses that we've discussed in this module. I will look forward to hearing your analyses and perspectives of yourself. It's important to note that I'm having you do a self-analysis. I am not here to analyze you, but I am here to support and encourage your ongoing assessment of yourself based upon what you continue to learn now and throughout your life. With that being said, I wish you much love and aloha to you and yours.